I wasn't trying to be some savior. I just didn't like onions. Yeah, that's how it started. Me complaining about onions in a soup that smelled too damn good to argue with. It was late October, 1877. Wyoming territory, the kind of cold that bites through your coat before the sun even sets. My ranch sat quiet as a graveyard, tucked between two ridges that burned red under evening light. For years since Abigail passed, for years of silence thick enough to choke a man. And now there was this girl in my kitchen, stirring soup and crying into the damn pot like no one was watching. I wasn't mad, just curious. She tried to wipe her tears quick, but I saw. Yeah, I saw. Clara had been with me 2 weeks, sent by Pastor Monroe, who swore she was gentle and no trouble. Which, you know, usually means there's a story nobody wants to talk about. She didn't speak, not one word since she got here. I thought she might be mute. She cooked well, cleaned better, but never smiled. Not once. That night, we sat across from each other, me pretending I wasn't hungry, her pretending she wasn't crying. The onions were perfect, soft and sweet, but I kept my mouth shut. Saying it out loud felt too big. After supper, she cleaned up and disappeared into the little back room. I sat by the fire, staring at flames that didn't feel warm anymore. Snow piling against the barn like the world didn't care I was losing mine. I buried her myself on the ridge, just me, a frozen shovel, and the sound of silence I never got rid of. So yeah, I recognized that look in Clara's eyes. I'd seen it in my own mirror. The next morning, I asked her straight, "Do you not speak because you can't or because you won't?" She hesitated. Scribbled on a scrap of paper, "I do not speak anymore." That word, anymore, hit me like a hammer. I pushed gently. Since I was 15, it stopped. I didn't ask more. But suddenly I cared too damn much. She wasn't just some quiet girl. She was running from something. And now that something was in my house by proxy, clawing at the walls through her silence. I liked this place in spring. Things that made me smile for the first time in years. And for a while, I let myself believe maybe life could be something other than waiting to die. Then Emery Hask showed up. Tall, sharp-faced, grin that didn't reach his eyes. The kind of man you just know shouldn't be trusted. Claimed he was her kin. Waved some paper stamped with the county seal. Said he had full custody. Clara froze when she saw him, turned white as snow, and scribbled so fast her hand shook. He was my foster uncle. He hurt me. My gut burned, but the law didn't give a damn about guts. Sheriff looked me in the eye and said his hands were tied. "Don't do something stupid, Jacob," he warned. Too late. I was already thinking it. Clara packed her small satchel in silence. At the door, I knelt and whispered, "If you want to stay, I'll fight, no matter what it costs." She looked at me, tears brimming, but stepped onto that damn wagon anyway. She left a single word torn from her notebook on the table. "Oh, that's it. Just oh." The ranch turned dead again. Every night, I lit the lamp over the sink. Left it burning like a prayer. 1 week later, the storm hit. Thunder cracking the sky, rain hammering the roof. And there was a knock. Not loud, just frantic. I opened the door, and there she was. Barefoot, soaked, bruised. Clara didn't say a word, just stood there shaking like she'd used up the last of her strength walking here. I didn't ask questions, just washed her feet, wrapped her in a blanket, held her when she finally broke down. She slept by the fire that night, no nightmares for the first time since she arrived. And in the quiet, I knew something had shifted. Not pity, not duty, something deeper, something like hope. The next morning, she stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of my old flannels, cutting apples like she'd always been there. She took my hand, traced one word into my palm. Home. That smile she gave me? Damn, it felt like sunrise after a long winter. So yeah, life changed. Slowly, gently. She stayed. We found a rhythm, planting seeds, baking bread from Abigail's old cookbook, leaving each other silly notes. Once she wrote, "I'm not afraid anymore." I carved 6 words into a piece of pine and handed it to her. "Stay, Clara." Not as a guest. She pressed it to her chest, tears falling soft as snow, and nodded. A week later. To keep her when the law said otherwise? Because I'll be honest, if Hask ever comes back looking for her, I won't be lighting a lamp. I'll be loading a rifle. Yeah, I said it. What would you have done? Tell me, was it justice or just selfish love? Chicago's O'Hare bustled the way only big American airports can. Fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee. People's voices layered over rolling suitcase wheels and overhead announcements. If you'd seen Zora Rockefeller walking against the flow, her small suitcase trailing behind her, you'd never guess what kind of storm she'd just weathered on that flight, or the weight she was carrying in her chest. Worry about her father, the ache of missing her mother, and the strange burden of a name that could open doors and build walls at the same time. Her Aunt Josephine waited by a coffee stand, sharp as ever in her pressed suit, hair pulled back, posture ramrod straight, the kind of woman who looks like she's never flinched in her life. When she spotted Zora, though, her eyes softened. She swept the girl into a hug. And for a moment Zora let herself be a kid again, let her guard drop, just for family. "How was the flight, sweetheart?" Josephine asked, searching her niece's face for clues. "It was educational, Aunt Jo," Zora replied, her tone old for her years. And Josephine, she didn't press. Not here, not with strangers passing, not with Zora so clearly fighting to keep her composure. In the car heading toward Hyde Park, Josephine finally coaxed the story out. Zora told it plain, about the man who didn't want her sitting beside him in first class. The way everything flipped when her last name came out, how the flight attendants and even the captain suddenly changed their tune. Josephine listened in silence. Josephine reached over and squeezed her hand. "Baby, your mama would have said something, sure. But you handled it the way only you could. Don't ever think that wasn't enough." That was all they said on it for a while. Sometimes, what hurts most isn't the world's cruelty. It's realizing the rules are different for you, and always will be. The framed photo of her mother propped up just so helped, but they couldn't block out what was coming. That night, Josephine took a call from Marcus. She paced her office, voice low, anxiety twisting every word. Stage 3, it had spread. Aggressive chemo would start next week, and Zora, she needed to stay in Chicago for a while. When Josephine broke the news to her niece, Zora nodded, "All business. What about my schoolwork? Who's feeding Pixel?" Practical questions, the shield of a child who's already lost too much. It didn't hit her until she was alone, curled up in bed, clutching her mother's photograph to her chest. That's when the tears came, the kind that rack your whole body, that you try so hard to keep from everyone else. Mrs. Carter just sat beside her, rubbing her back, whispering old family wisdom. "Some people need to see your crown before they recognize your royalty. But don't you ever forget you had it all along." In art, in anything that let her focus on something besides her father's diagnosis. Josephine did her best to keep everything running smoothly, but Zora could see the worry etched in her aunt's face. The calls to Philadelphia that always ended with a forced smile. And then, life did what it does best, threw another curveball. Marcus landed in the hospital, complications from treatment, infection that could turn bad, fast. Josephine had to fly out at once, leaving Zora behind with Mrs. Carter for the night and a ticket on the next morning's flight to Philadelphia. At the airport, Zora felt older than her years, her suitcase heavier, the world bigger and less forgiving. And who was at the gate but Harrison Whitfield, reading on his tablet, oblivious. If this were a movie, you'd think fate had a twisted sense of humor. Zora almost sat far away, but something, her mother's voice in her head, maybe, pushed her to walk up and say hello. When Harrison looked up and recognized her, his face went through about 4 shades of surprise. Harrison's reaction was honest, genuine concern, no pretense. "I'm sorry," he said, and for once, it wasn't just a formality. They flew together, same row as before, 2A and 2B. The flight attendant mistook them for father and daughter, and Zora, with that classic Rockefeller composure, simply rolled with it. They talked, a little about books, a little about families, and a lot about what it means to feel out of place, even when you're technically right where you're supposed to be. Harrison offered to see her to the hospital. "Because it's what my mother would want me to do," he explained quietly. "And because it's what your mother would want for you." Zora nodded, too tired to argue, too grateful to say much. In the hospital lobby, as Zora was finally reunited with her father and aunt, Harrison quietly introduced himself, apologized again for the man he'd been on that first flight, and handed Josephine his card. "If you need anything in Philadelphia, just call." Maybe it wasn't redemption, but it was something. The days that followed were a mess of medical updates, school transitions, and moments of unexpected connection. Harrison and Zora kept in touch, sometimes by chance, an email here, a museum visit there, forming a friendship built not on obligation, but genuine respect. Zora began to open up, just a little, and Harrison found himself questioning things he'd always taken for granted. The way people look at each other. The little assumptions that build up over a lifetime. The weight a name can carry. 3 months later, Zora was living full-time in Chicago. Marcus's treatments had some hopeful signs, but the future was still a tangle of uncertainty. Harrison, on a business trip to Chicago, invited Zora and Josephine to a lecture series by his mother, Dr. Elena Whitfield, a force of nature in education and civil rights. As Zora listened to Elena's words about art, justice, and seeing the world through new eyes, she found herself raising her hand during the Q&A. Sometimes the most powerful change starts not with a movement or a masterpiece, but with one human being seeing another, really seeing them, maybe for the first time. Afterward, Harrison and Zora lingered by the exit, both changed by what had happened between them, both still working through what it all meant. "You know," Harrison said, "I used to think growth was about being right. Now I think it's about being willing to get better." Zora smiled, that old wisdom shining in her young face. "My mother would have liked you," she said. The open question still hangs in the air. Do we only value people when they carry a name that means something? Or can we learn to see each other, crown or no crown, as worthy? So if you felt something hearing this story, don't just keep it to yourself. Let us know in the comments. What's your take on justice, on privilege, on what it takes for a community to really grow? And if you want to hear more stories like Zora's, stories that challenge and connect us, hit that subscribe button. Because these conversations, they matter more than we think. What would you do? Faced with a moment like this? Would you stay silent or speak up? The story's not over, and it might just be yours next.